And so now that brings us to South Korea and Japan relations improving very recently, especially, and then we have China. So how are relations between China and South Korea and China and Japan? Do you see some balancing or some strategic thinking among those three governments and these the three major players in the region?
So, with those three players, South Korea has better relations with China. And Japan than Japan and China have with each other.
Yeah.
So she's not so new now, but the current president in South Korea, unlike her predecessor, really warmed up in terms of the political relationship between South Korea and China. She visited Beijing. It was a very successful visit. Relations were going pretty well. Maybe that's part of the reason why Japan was willing to compromise on the historical issue of the
comfort women,
the sex slaves during the war, and reach this agreement where Japan would formally apologize and South Korea would say, okay, then we'll drop the issue. We won't bring it up all the time now. So that seemed to be kind of a breakthrough, which was, by the way, something the United States had hoped for because the U.S. sees them both as allies and wants to ensure everybody, the U.S., Korea, and Japan can cooperate on issues in the region. The problem with that is even though almost immediately after that agreement was reached, you had some in South Korea saying that it wasn't good enough, it wasn't enough of an apology, left out the question, I guess, of reparations or whatever. And pretty soon you had people in Japan who thought that Japan shouldn't have apologized, making comments. So it's not clear if that's going to hold. I would say that the Japan-South Korea relationship is probably going to fluctuate. It'll warm and it'll cool from time to time. The problem for the Chinese is even though President Park in South Korea had really invested heavily in warming relations with Beijing, after the North Korean nuclear test, the Chinese wouldn't take the phone call from President Park to the Chinese. Basically, the South Koreans wanted to reach out to China directly and say, this is insane, the North Koreans are at it again. And I think that it's pretty clear from the media reports of South Korea's elite and presumably the president were really disappointed that China wasn't going to directly engage with South Korea on the North Korean nuclear test. I can tell you why I think the Chinese didn't. It's because their view is, well, formally we're allied with North Korea, it wouldn't be appropriate, but it's foolish because I think it's damaged China's relation with South Korea.